court is now back in session. I hand over the floor to Counsel Victor Kope to resume his line of questioning.
Hello again, Mr. Pak Chim. Just one or two follow-up questions in relation to my questions before the break. You might not remember, but I asked you some questions in June 2013 during the first trial. So I think I know already the answer to the questions that I want to ask, but I just want to ask them again. Have you yourself, while in District 105, witnessed any executions, any killings of former Lon Nol officials or military?
No, I never witnessed the execution of the Lon Nol soldiers.
The following question I asked you also already in June 2013. Have you yourself ever ordered the execution of former Lon Nol officials or military? I heard you say ate.
Response: No, I have never ordered any execution of Lon Nol soldier.
Are you aware of any executions of former Lon Nol officials or military in your district between 1975 and 79?
I have never witnessed the execution. I have never ordered myself, but I am aware that there were executions.
Let me turn to the sector chief, the chief of Sector 13, Tassaum. You have given testimony to the investigators about Tassaum. You spoke briefly about him in your earlier testimony. What can you tell us about Tassaum? What kind of person, in terms of political line, political stance, was he?
On that issue, well, I did not know Saum before following the coup d'etat, and actually following the coup d'etat, I saw him. Before that, I had never met him. They whispered to me that he was from the sector. He was newly appointed person from the sector, and then I got to know him from that point in time onward. He was from Koh Nhieu, and I was from a different place, but in the evening we went to that place, and then we met, and I was told by my colleague. It was not an open introduction. They whisper to me so that I got to know him. And subsequently, I continue my work, and there was no appointment or official appointment or so from the upper authority. So whenever there was the assignment or so from him, then we would follow. And then long afterwards, there was the official appointment as the sector committee. But during the festivity or any celebration or any function, they would sit on stage in the committee. I knew him and his work by asking other people. Actually, he was among the intellectuals who were from the city, from Phnom Penh. I did not know what he did in 1968, but I know that he got married to a wife from Kampong Chnang's province, and he once took refuge in Kampong Chnang province. When he came, a post came with him, and then 1 year later, Tamok appointed him. Capacity-wide and courage. Actually, he had chronic disease. He had problem with his back, but he was well educated. He was literate. He was very good in Khmer literature.
Was he seen or considered by the party as someone who was a leftist, somebody who was radical, somebody who was in favor of the Cultural Revolution as it was implemented in China?
From the party, I did not know, but among the mass, particularly the people in the village, in the commune, he was known to be someone who was very strict and aggressive. And being aggressive, it means that he was very firm with his stance, he was very strict in his decision.
Would you be able to tell us what connection he had with Chu Chet, alias C?
He did not have any relation or connection with Chu Chet. Actually, Chu Chet was his superior, and Tamok was also his superior, and he follows the instruction very carefully. He was very firm in his position, and he was very straightforward in his point and decision. In his study session, people would understand it very clearly on the lessons that he taught. I actually saw Chu Chet once. He went there, and Chu Chet attended the district office. Saum was there as well. He came to my office, but at that time there was no any disagreement also among them, and Tamok was also there with them.
នឹងក្រោយរំដោះ
That happened after the liberation. But as to their connection, to my knowledge, I don't think that there was any connection between the two.
What happened to Saum? Was he at one point arrested?
No, he was not. He was not arrested. He became sick toward the end, and then he was admitted to a hospital in Phnom Penh. Actually, his wife had been admitted to hospital before. His wife delivered the baby, but then he became seriously sick. And he was admitted to hospital. And then once the Vietnamese troop came in, we evacuated him. And he left for Sisopon. And then they asked him to move further. And then, but he just declined to move out, even if his wife insisted that he move out, but he said he would not move out. I don't know what happened to him. He was almost became mad or so, and he did not want to go because he said the Vietnamese came into Cambodia because of him. He did not want to leave. And then after that, we did not see him anymore.
Did he at one point in time also started working for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs?
His name was actually admitted to Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but he himself was being hospitalized at that time.
Man.
Well, that was it then. His name was in Ministry of Foreign Affairs. His name was added, actually. There was somebody there. But in terms of the ranking, he held a higher ranking position than the one who was at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
When was the last time you saw him?
Before I left, I said goodbye to him, and he wept at that time because he said that I was the only one who had supported him and have fed him when they all left Takeo province. And when he was admitted to the hospital, at the time it was the Prasang Hospital. When I came to Phnom Penh to visit him, I brought with me a bunch of coconut, and then he wept at that time. And I only visited him briefly. The President. Mr. Pachim, I have reminded you so far that you need to be brief in your response. You have to try to listen to the question put to you, and you try to answer to what is being asked. You do not need to go further than what is being asked, because we are running out of time, and it is you who will be tired at the end of the day if you give longer answer than necessary.
Very brief question, Mr. Pekchim. Did you see Saum after 1979, after the Vietnamese had invaded?
No, the last time I saw him was when he was in hospital.
What about the Undersecretary of Sector 13, Penn? What do you know about him?
Pine was appointed the sector chief, 43, sector 43 chief, but wherever he went, he would drop by my house in Kampong Cham with Kai Pork. He would eat there and took the rest there as well. Later, he was removed. He was transferred actually to the southwest zone. So from that time onwards, I did not know anything about him anymore.
And what was the relation between Penn and Chu Chet, alias C?
No, there was no relation. And they asked the reason why he was removed from that. He said because his brother had been arrested. And then when the Vietnamese came, he was struggling in the jungle and he got killed over there. I actually heard from others. One of my relatives were dead in that fighting. I actually lost one son in that fighting.
Finally, do you know what the relation was, if any, between Takiv and Chu Chet?
No, I don't.
Chu Chet was the leader of the Western Zone at one point, but at one point also, together with Tamok, the leadership of the Southwest Zone. Do you remember when exactly the zones were divided into two zones? When was that the Southwest Zone was split up in two zones?
I cannot recall. I cannot recall it clearly, but I recall that it was after 17 April 1975, then it was split into two. One was the West Zone under Chu Chet, and the Southwest under Tamok.
Do you know why Chu Chet was arrested in March 1978?
No, I don't.
Do you know what the relationship was between Chu Chet and Sao Pim, the leader of the East Zone?
No, I don't.
You were asked this question by the investigators as well, but I'm asking you again. Do you know who Ru Nim was?
I only heard his name, but I have never met him. I only heard his name and his work, that he was responsible for one of the zones. He was maybe responsible for one of the zone in the east, or so. I only actually knew his names like I knew the elephant.
Do you know anything about a coup d'etat led by Sao Pim in 1978?
No, I don't.
What can you tell us about any rebellion? You spoke earlier in your interviews to the investigators about a rebellion. Yesterday you also spoke about internal struggle. Who was fighting whom? Can you be a bit more specific as to what you meant with groups of cadres within the CPK fighting each other? Can you explain us a little bit what you meant?
I try to clarify it briefly. I learned of that situation, then I thought to myself, why did they argue with each other? Then I found out later on that whenever they arrested someone, they would implicate others in the parties, and then they would arrest them. So that was the situation. There was implication from one person to another. So then people in the parties found out that that was not the right decision. That was not the right approach in the party. Then the problem took place, and then like Tamok and Chuche did not come into terms with each other. That's why the zone was split into two, so that one could control one zone exclusively. And then, for example, Sai in Kampot province, people allege him of being loyal to the Vietnamese. Then he was removed. But that was the allegation. We did not know whether or not he was the string of the Vietnamese. At that time, nobody knew. I am trying to be frank in Cambodian culture. So he was in prison. So that was the implications he was charged with. And then he would be interrogated about the other cadres in the East Zone with Sao Pum and others. And it was the same thing. When one Wade was in power, he was not a very influential person in the party. And eventually, I will try to be exhaustive because I do not know if I have time to come back here again. Eventually, Tamok and Pol Pot themselves disagreed with each other. They argued with each other. In other words, the two giants were fighting with each other. They clashed. There was a brief exchange of fires, and then after that, Pol Pot handed over the power to Tamok to take control of both in political powers and military power to be under the control of Tamok. I actually did not attend the meeting that resulted in that decision, but I learned from those who took part in the meeting. And then he agreed that Tamok would control everything.
It's a little bit.
ก็
It's a bit out of the scope of my question, but just to follow up to, are you talking about a clash between Tamok and Pol Pot in the period 75 or 79, or back in the 80s or 90s?
It was in 1979. Well, actually, it was toward the end of that period when the Khmer Rouge was dismantled, and Long Veng was taken over. The Khmer Rouge last stronghold was dismantled.
Right. Let me go back, Mr. Pekchim, to the word implications. That you were saying people were implicating other people. Did you know that Chu Chet had implicated Salm, Penn, and Keith as his collaborators, or you did you not know that?
The President, Mr. Pitcham, please be mindful of the microphone before you speak. You have to wait until the microphone is activated. Witness response. No, I do not know anything about it. The President, the Chambers observes that you are becoming very tired. That's why the Chamber gently reminds you to try your best to only answer to the question being asked. You should try to avoid a very long winding answers, because you will be fatigued at the end of the day. So you should try to answer to only the question asked.
Mr. President, would it be an idea to, if that's correct what you're observing, that the witness is indeed fatigued, that we stop now, because we will continue tomorrow anyway, and maybe a half hour tomorrow would be more fruitful than a half hour now. This is just a suggestion. It's of course to your wisdom.
President, Mr. Pecham, the Chamber would like to know whether you can continue for another half an hour. And if you restrain yourself to only responding to the points asked of you, then the Chamber is certain that you will only be required for tomorrow morning, and then you can return home. So please tell the Chamber whether you would like to stop now or whether you can continue for another half an hour. Witness, I'd like to continue for another half an hour, and I'll try my best to answer the questions. President, if there is the case, Council, you may continue.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Pekchim, in answers to investigators of the co-investigating judge, you made some observations in relation to Pol Pot, Tamok, Son Sen, and Nuon Chea. I would like to read an answer that you gave to you, that is E319.1.18. That is your answer 58. And the question is as follows. Let me rephrase, Mr. President. Let me start with answer 56. That might be easier. Question: to your knowledge, did Tamok have authorities over other zones apart from the southwest zone? Your answer: during the time the internal problem occurred, Tamok had authorities to take control over the northwest zone. Later on, when there were problems in the central zone and the east zone, Tamok also had authorities to control the central zone and the east zone. As far as I knew, Pol Pot authorized Tamok, and it was Tamok's basic tasks. Question: to your knowledge, did Tamok receive orders directly from Pol Pot or Son Sen, alias Brother 89, the Chief of the General Staff? Tamok received direct orders from Pol Pot. Question: what convinced you to believe that Tamok received direct orders from Pol Pot? Answer: because Tamok was the second person to Pol Pot. Organizationally, the first person was Pol Pot, the second one was Nuon Chea, and Tamok was the third person. But when receiving orders, Tamok received direct orders from Pol Pot, not Nuon Chea. As for Son Sen, he was in the Central Committee of the party, but not under Tamok. My question to you, Mr. Pekchim, this seems to be high-level knowledge of the command structure. Can you tell us how you know this?
Mr. President, just...
President, witness, please wait, and the Deputy Co-Prosecutor, you have the floor.
Just to correct the record, I think counsel may have inadvertently misread the last part of it. The transcript, or the interview actually says, as for Son Sen, he was in the Central Committee of the party, but under Tamok. Counsel read not under Tamok.
I apologize, but under Tamok. My question, Mr. Witness, this seemed to be, your answer seems to be quite detailed knowledge of the organizational structure within the standing committee. Would you be able to tell us how you knew this, that Tamok was in fact the number two factually?
Allow me to clarify, he was the third person, not the second person. And that was based on my inquiry with the people who were familiar with the organization structure. And people in Phnom Penh actually told me about that who was the first, the second, or the third person. And previously it was not organized in that way.
Thank you for that clarification. That's very helpful. But my question was, how do you know this? Did you just hear it from people, or did you have any other way of knowing such detailed aspects of the commando structure?
I asked the questions to the people that I knew. I did not dare ask the Tamok. And in fact, I asked the Kai Pok who involved at the center, and he was also head of the zone. So Tamok was at the zone, but when he came to the center, he became the deputy.
ហើយឃើញប្រកាស
And there was also an announcement about the Central Permanent Committee members. Son Sen was a candidate standing member, and he was the last person amongst the five. Pol Pot, Nun Chia, Tamok, Ing Sari, and Son Sen.
កាលហ្នឹងភាគ
As the rest, they were in charge of the zones.
Let me try another example from your statement to the OCIJ investigators. Again, E319.1.18. In your answer to question 95, you said the following. The question is, you said that Son Sen was under Tamok. To your knowledge, was it possible that Tamok was the one who assigned Meas Mut as the Division 2 Secretary? Answer. I do not think so, because the Central Committee in charge of the military made the decision. The people in charge of the military included Son Sen, Tamok, and Pol Pot. Not a single person decided this matter. It was decided by all of them. I would like to answer that I do not know the answer to this question because I'm not sure. And the following question, did you know if it was possible that Meas Mut was an assistant member of the military committee of the Revolutionary Army of Cambodia? Answer, at first I did not know. I knew it later. I saw Meas Mut in a film. Then I secretly asked a high-ranking person in the army. Then I was told that Meas Mut was an alternate member of the military committee of the Revolutionary Army of Cambodia. Again, Mr. Pekchim, this seems to be detailed knowledge about the structures in the highest positions of the CPK. Can you tell us a bit more about how you came to know this?
I asked questions, and I discussed with the people who were familiar with the structure. I spoke to Boon, and mostly I learned from Kai Pok.
មានប៉ុណ្ណឹង
And that is all. That's how I obtained that information.
I understand. But can you explain to us why it is that you do not really know Sao Pim or Runim or Heng Samrin? Is there any reason that you don't know anything about them, or is it that you do not wish to speak about them?
We were living far away from one another. Here I refer to Sao Prim and Heng Samrin.
គឺថាស្គាល់
I cannot say that I know them.
I understand that you might not know them or might not have known them personally, but if I ask you to think a bit more, what can you tell us about Sao Pim, Runim, Chuchet, Vornvet? What can you tell us about them?
អត់បានទេ
No, I cannot tell you anything else. as I was at the other side of the country, and they were at the opposite side, and I only move rather at the east zone. There was Rohingya and Saupam, and sometimes I confuse these two individuals, and upon my arrival I did not meet them as they had passed away. So I don't know what else I can tell you about this.
Thank you, Mr. Bekchim. I'll move on to another topic. And that is your knowledge as to what happened in terms of food supply, healthcare, education, etc., in the other districts in Sector 13. Are you able to tell us anything about what happened there between 75 and 79? For instance, you might have had discussions with other district secretaries of these districts. Can you tell us a bit more about the situation in these other districts in Sector 13?
In fact, I only can say about the general term and situation. For example, you talk about the productions of potato and whether such a potato production was produced in various other districts like Angkor, Chey, or Kohandat or Trang. And maybe the situation was worse in Trang district. At that time, we provided rice at the request of some. If I recall well, we gave them several batches of rice. Sometimes it was 10 sacks, and the other time it was 15 sacks. And in fact, when we decided to send them the rice, all the communes under our district also agreed to that because they were in short supply. As at that time, both the best people and the new people hate gruel. And we follow the principle of our old saying that we should have those who were in need. And that was with us in our spirit as well.
But in terms of implementation of party policy, here in this court we are focusing on the events in District 105. But I believe it would be helpful if we are able to somehow compare the achievements or non-achievements in District 105 with the other districts in Sector 13. Based on conversations with other leading members of these districts, can you tell us a bit more about how party policy was implemented in these districts?
From our observation and later on through our discussion, the yield or the achievement was moderate. That will be the level that we estimated.
Do you know whether people were hungry in District 106, 107, 108 or 109?
we were all in the same situation in terms of a food shortage, for instance.
And what about, for instance, the decision, the apparent decision to disrobe or defrock monks? Do you know whether this happened in District 106, 107, 108, and 109 as well?
I cannot recall that because by that time all monks had come through stayed at District 105 and none of them returned to other districts. However, there were a few in Angkor district. So in terms of measures for the monks, it applied all across the districts.
Talking about the policy toward monks, do you remember whether there was any directive or order within the revolutionary flag when it comes to Buddhism, when it comes to the treatment of monks? Do you remember any central guideline written down in any of the revolutionary flags?
At that time, I read it once, but I did not read it fully, and I cannot recall whether there was such a policy mentioned in that magazine.
Turning to the revolutionary flag, you've given testimony that you read the revolutionary flag between 75 and 79. Was the revolutionary flag also meant to announce party policy to the sectors and the district?
There was an announcement in the Revolutionary Flag magazine, and some policy lines were also repeated in the magazine as a reminder to the cadres. However, sometimes, because we were busy engaging in our daily affairs, we tended to forget about the policies. And it did not mean that we did not want to adhere to the policies. And that is all.
Have you ever seen any policy announcement in the revolutionary flag about marriages in democratic Kampuchea and about what should be done in relation to marriage policy?
I cannot remember it. I only know in general terms, but not the specifics of that principle. And of course, I read it in the Flag magazine, and we tried to follow the guidelines stated in that magazine to the best as we could.
And returning again to the question of Buddhism, what do you remember having read about policy toward Buddhism in democratic Kampuchea in the revolutionary flag?
I read it and I consider it personally, although I did not discuss the issues with my colleagues. And I try to consider myself and to analyze the issues whether Buddhism had any impact on the revolution. And I concluded that Buddhism did not have any impact on the revolution because Buddhism was so gentle, as it had been practiced for almost 2,000 years, but we did not gain anything. On the contrary, we had lost our territory. However, let me state it again, that was my personal analysis. So I believed at the time, based on my conclusion, that Buddhism did not have any impact on the revolution.
Did you ever order people within your district not to practice Buddhism?
No, I did not. Whoever wished to practice Buddhism, they were freely allowed to do so.
Do you know of any instances where people were punished for having practiced Buddhism in your district?
There was none.
Mr. Pekchim, we have had, I believe, 2 witnesses testifying to the trial chamber that in, I believe, 1975 had witnessed the demolition of Buddhist statues in pagodas. Have you heard about this?
Yes, I did. I actually gave my answer on this point, that in general it had to be demolished. I maintained my silence, and it did not mean that I agree with that practice.
But I'm not sure if I understood you correctly. Who was responsible for the demolition of Buddhist statues? Do you know that? I think I heard your answer in Khmer, but could you repeat it, please, with the light on?
No, I don't. I don't know who demolished the Buddhist statue in District 105.
Do you know who had ordered that, the demolition? Who was responsible for this? I mean, in terms of instructing people.
they said about that it was the chairperson of the party who gave that instruction. Although I did not like it, I kept quiet. And as for those people who actually did the demolition, I did not know them.
ប្រជុំនឹងគណៈ
And actually, the meeting was held for the district committee, including Khom and Nieu.
And who was the chairperson responsible? And was this person punished for his acts or her acts?
It was the party, and Khom was the chairperson of the party. Kiel was the deputy, and the other person was a member.
But do you know whether they had acted under the instructions of upper echelon, or was it an act by them, only by them, without any authorization from the upper echelon?
I knew that they did not initiate the instructions, but they obtained the instructions from the upper echelon.
And who precisely? Do you know?
During the meeting, Khom, who was the chairperson of the party, gave us the instructions on the demolition and that we had to implement it.
គុំយកទៅនឹងគេចាត់តាំងណា
So I did not know who else were assigned at the commune level. As at the district level, it was Khom who gave that instruction to us.
Do you know why in Phnom Penh there are no reports of demolition of Buddhist statues in pagodas?
President, the witness, please wait, and the deputy co-prosecutor, you have the floor.
The objection is that counsel is leading and testifying himself. I don't know the basis of this assertion on his part, but he shouldn't be leading the witness in testifying.
I will rephrase. Mr. Pekchim, do you know anything about the fate of Buddhist statues in pagodas in Phnom Penh between 75 and 79?
I cannot answer your question. I actually don't get your question. What you mean about the impact of Buddhist statues in Phnom Penh, and I would like to seek clarification from the President of the Chamber on this issue.
បើគាត់ចង់
President, the Council wants to know whether you know what happened to Buddhism, and in particular to Buddhist statues and through pagodas in Phnom Penh during the period of democratic Cambodia? Answer: yes, indeed. It happened nationwide. I talked about the impact. So it not only had an impact on on Buddhism in Cambodia, but it had an impact on Buddhism elsewhere, including the Buddhism in China and throughout the world. President, thank you, Council Copper, and thank you, Mr. Pichum. We adjourn today's proceedings now, and we will resume tomorrow, that is Friday the 24th April 2015, commencing from 9 o'clock in the morning. The Chamber will continue to hear the remaining testimony of the witness Pichum. And Mr. Pichum, the Chamber is grateful of your presence. However, your testimony is not yet concluded, and you are invited once again to come to testify in this courtroom tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. You may now return to your place of residence. And Duty Counsel, the Chamber would like also to thank you for your assistance, and again you are invited to return tomorrow to provide your assistance to the witness. It will commence at 9 o'clock. And the court officer, in collaboration with the RISU, please make necessary transportation for Mr. Pichum to his place of residence and have him return to this courtroom tomorrow before 9 o'clock. Security personnel are instructed to take the two accused, Nunchi and Kieu Sampon, back to the detention facility and have them return to attend the proceedings tomorrow morning before 9 o'clock. The court is now adjourned.